Apple Silicon is legendary at this point for being one of the most power-efficient computer chips in the game, and in many of my reviews, I've shown the power efficiency in benchmarks and tests, so much so that I concluded that you can leave your power brick at home. But with so much synthetic testing in modern reviews, is Apple Silicon really that efficient? And if it is it good enough to actually forget your charger on a trip? Well, I set out to find that answer by literally doing just that, by bringing the new 15-inch MacBook Air out to a vacation in Toronto for 5 days without packing a power brick to see if it can last me for all 5 days. I just woke up, it's 5 a.m. right now, and I left the MacBook Air on the charger all night, so it's at 100% battery life for the beginning of this trip. At 5:10, I called an Uber to the airport, and at 5:30, I arrived at the airport. I got through airport security and arrived at my gate at 6 o'clock. At the gate, I found an open seat and took out the MacBook to wait for boarding, spending most of my time just browsing through Twitter for the latest updates. One thing I love is how even though the 15-inch MacBook Air is a big device, it fits really nicely on my lap and it's still lightweight and great for general travel. One question I did have though was, is the 15-inch size laptop going to fit on those smaller airplane tray tables? And yeah, it fits, with even a little room to spare, and you could probably place a drink next to it, but I'd probably think twice about that. You know, just for security reasons. The flight to Toronto is super quick from New York, so it only takes about an hour. So I was only able to type up a few notes before we had to put large electronics away for landing, but even at 8 a.m., battery life is still at 100%. I landed at the airport, went through security screenings, and basically did a bunch of time-consuming stuff you're not allowed to film. But hey, Toronto being home to a Carlos Bakery vending machine always makes me feel like I'm back at home. Now, while I could call an Uber, I love how easy it is to take the airport train into Toronto, and it's also a lot cheaper. Now, while on the train, I didn't really use my laptop all that much because I do get a little motion sickness sometimes when reading on moving vehicles, so for the most part, I decided to stay off any electronic devices and just enjoy the train ride views into the city.
You know, it's always bad when you start with your messy hair, but I gotta get my hair ready, and I'm hoping to have like a jam-packed day for today, for a Tuesday. You know, very light usage for the MacBook Air. Let's be honest. I'm on a trip. This isn't like a work trip or anything like that, so I'm not really like busting my butt on the MacBook Air, using it like to like its full capacity for like battery life and everything. But I did take my flight yesterday. I did land in Toronto. And you know, it's the next day now. I was using the laptop this morning, just checking some email, writing some notes, checking up on Twitter, some news and stuff like that. And battery life, as I'm sitting here now, it's still at 98%. I took this off the charger at 5 a.m. yesterday. And, you know, I said, you know, we're not going to charge this for the entire trip. We're going to see, you know, how good are these Apple Silicon battery life claims in like real world scenarios like this. And so far, this thing is holding up extremely well, 98%. So I like to see that. And it's been a pleasure to travel with so far. It fit on the airplane tray table, no problem. Thin and light, no problem taking it through airport security, all that stuff. So I'm really liking my 15-inch MacBook Air travel experience so far. And I do need to find some coffee. So maybe we'll take the MacBook Air with us, go get some coffee. Let's go do that. Let's get out of here.
I stumbled across this Vietnamese cafe, which I had only planned to get a latte at, but when I saw the pork adobo banh mi, I knew I had to get it. After a quick bite and a few sips of this pandan latte, I spent some time browsing through some work emails. I try and separate work as much as possible from personal trips, but when you work for yourself, you always have to be somewhat at the helm. I put in my AirPods Pro, started listening to some music, and started blasting through the rest of my emails. Listening to music while working usually puts me in the zone, and I was able to answer a bunch of emails here. And it's also a nice reminder how much I love the modern MacBook keyboards. They're reliable, they're stable, and with just the right amount of travel, it is always a pleasure to type on a new Mac. I stayed here for quite a bit, even getting a second ube latte, but I really feel like I overstayed my welcome here, and it was starting to get crowded, so I actually wanted to check out another cafe while I was here, so I packed the MacBook Air into my backpack and set forth on a quick walk to my next destination. Cafe hopping is a thing I do frequently, so don't judge me too harshly. I found my next cafe and enjoyed a nice iced Americano, a switch up from the lattes. That's 3 coffee drinks this morning if you're counting, while admiring the big screen on the 15-inch MacBook Air. I still can't get over how nice this big screen is while still keeping the ultra portable nature of the MacBook Air name. I also took some time to plan the rest of my day in Structured. This is kind of like a daily task calendar app that I like to use for a rough schedule of how I plan out my day. It's more useful on a work day, but I'm trying to use it on my off days too. Filling in Structured, especially during those work days though, really helps me stay on task and helps remind me that there's plenty of time gaps to fill in with other projects and activities, and it kind of helps me keep focused on working to the next project rather than just goofing off. And it's been a really productive morning so far. It's 1:40 p.m. on the second day, and yeah, this MacBook Air has been great, and the battery life is still at 84% remaining, which is a good sign for the rest of the week, but it is just getting started. Now, I spent a fair bit of time on my MacBook this morning following up on those emails I sent out yesterday afternoon. I also spent some time checking my YouTube analytics for the first time in a few days, which is always hard to do when you're on a trip and not publishing content. Sometimes it feels like a hamster wheel making YouTube videos, and if you let that wheel stop spinning, it can kind of negatively affect not only your channel, but your mood, which is a weird place to be in. Not to have you like pity poor me, I'm very happy to be doing this, but it is a weird mental thing to keep in check when you're watching your favorite YouTube creators. Now, I have been trying to not let that affect me as much, and one thing that does help me out is responding to comments that you all leave in my videos. Even when I don't publish something, it's always a great feeling to come back to older videos and see that you enjoyed them or found them helpful in a purchasing decision, or if you learned something completely new from watching them. So if you're watching this right now, don't forget to say hi. I can't wait to see your reaction to this video, good or bad. Just let me have it. And while the record player in this hotel room is great, I already ran through a handful of records they provided, so this time I activated the power of Apple Music to browse an endless catalog of music and play some morning tunes right through the 15-inch MacBook Air speakers. One thing I really love about traveling with this 15-inch MacBook Air is that the bigger laptop speakers do pack a punch, and I can turn this thing up pretty loudly to get room-filling sound in a way that the smaller 13-inch Air would just fall short, and I love listening to music or podcasts while I shower. Of course, after getting ready, you know it's another trip to the cafe.
So it is now Wednesday. We are a little bit of like day 3 into the experiment of using the MacBook Air without bringing the charger. And you know, again, these are like short kind of bursts of using the MacBook. It's not like I've been like editing a video in like Final Cut Pro all day. Like obviously it wouldn't last, but it's been an interesting experiment so far. I think after listening to music and getting ready this morning, I believe the battery was about like 75% on day 3. I feel like that's pretty good. But you know, today's not a jam-packed day of using the MacBook Air either. So I'm gonna go get a cup of coffee. Listen, I'm zero caffeine in me right now. So if I'm messing up my words and stuff, and if I look tired, you can't blame me, okay? I gotta get my coffee first, and I'm probably gonna check up some more on emails there, and maybe write some notes down as well.
One thing I appreciate a lot on this trip is how the bigger screen size for the Air even makes it feel like an upgrade over my 14-inch MacBook Pro. That's something I shouldn't be saying, right? I shouldn't be saying that a MacBook Air has something better than a more expensive MacBook Pro, but this 15-inch MacBook Air having a bigger screen has an advantage over it. And I'm just not used to carrying around something this lightweight with so much screen real estate, which is really helpful when you don't have an external monitor handy. I can have a few apps open at once and have a comfortable enough workspace space for all of those apps to stay open. I'll also note it's day 3 of this trip using the MacBook Air, about a couple hours a day, and we are still at 68% battery life. I also have to remark on how living in the Apple ecosystem is an unparalleled experience, because I just got an iMessage that I saw on my MacBook that it's time to meet up. So this cafe venture is over a little faster than I expected, so a quick slip of the MacBook in the bag, and I'll probably see you in the morning. This morning, I decided to shake up my morning routine a little bit with no emails needing to be sent, so I decided to stay a bit longer in bed, catching up on some YouTube videos I missed since being on this trip. Again, I have to remark how clutch it is having a bigger screen with you on a trip for entertainment as well. In the off hours like this, it's really nice to just lay back and watch some videos, no headphones required with these great speakers. Also, when taking a trip, I know people love to bash technology, like it's all bad, don't be on your phones, don't be on your laptops, right? But it's a great way to stay in touch with our friends and family back home, and I haven't had much time for calls this week, but today I wanted to start with a FaceTime call back home to catch them up on what I've been doing on my trip in Toronto. I don't know about you, but I do this all the time with laptops, carrying it in my hands while pacing back and forth and having a conversation. For some reason, I love to walk back and forth when I'm talking. And even though I could be doing the same thing with my phone, something about that bigger screen and not having to hold my device with one hand outstretched somehow feels more comfortable despite the bigger size and heavier weight of the laptop. I don't know why I do this, I just do, but I feel like this is another strength of the Air. It doesn't really feel that heavy, and it's actually manageable to carry around open like this and still use it with one hand. Maybe I'm the only weirdo who uses their laptop like this from time to time, but it's something I've done for quite a while now.
Day 4 of this experiment of using the MacBook Air on my trip, not using the charger. I feel like that's the whole gimmick of this series, and kind of like how I actually use my technology on a trip when it's not so work focused. When I'm doing all these videos, reviewing all these laptops and stuff like that, there's a lot of benchmarks. There's a lot of talk about how fast this thing can video edit, but I really feel like the average user for a laptop like the MacBook Air is probably using it more like I am in these scenarios where they're taking it on a trip or they're using it at home, and they're using it more in these shorter burst workflows. And the experiment has been really good so far. It's so rare nowadays where I don't end the night charging all of my technology, just because, you kind of feel like so addicted to it. Like you don't want to be without it, and to not, to make a conscious effort to not charge it and to just let it go. Let's see how far we can take it. It's an interesting one. So yeah, day 4 on this trip, and I did some morning video calls, all that stuff. But yeah, we're at 44% on this MacBook Air as I'm sitting here right now. This is basically the last day of this trip. We just basically have, a little bit of tomorrow in the morning for this trip as well before we head back home. Before I head back home, I'm solo here. If you could tell, all the video shots were all me. It's not like I have a camera crew here. Before I head back home. So maybe I'll start importing footage into Final Cut Pro. And maybe I'll do a little bit of the beginning of the editing to maybe push the battery just a little bit farther. But yeah, so far everything about this experiment has been great. And I really like traveling with the MacBook Air. It's a very great laptop to travel with, and especially this 15-inch version. Having that extra screen real estate for watching videos in the morning, having the better speakers for listening to music when I'm getting ready. I'm appreciating all the aspects of this laptop, and it is really cool. But yeah, we've kind of began every morning with this series. I gotta go get a cup of coffee because I'm tired. I woke up, just got ready, got a loose strand. It kind of it's a look, right? So I'm gonna go get some coffee, and I guess I'll take the laptop with me. I don't know if I'm gonna do anything there, but why not? Look, I'm recording this, so I'm just gonna close it.
At this point, I feel like I'm the stereotypical Apple user. I'm a walking cliche here, having their laptop out from cafe to cafe, and it's like a stereotype for a reason. I've seen so many MacBooks at every cafe I visited in Toronto. Also, I have to give props to Toronto. They have some of the most consistent cafes out there. I don't think I've had a bad cup of coffee since I've been here. This time I did have an email response follow-up that I needed to take care of, and I needed to check my timetable for sponsorships on the channel on my calendar. July has been pretty free so far, but it's about to get hectic after this trip. The final day of my trip in Toronto is here, and it's time to check into my flight and get packed up to go to the airport. But I still have a little free time left before my flight, so I wanted to take all the footage I've shot so far and dump it onto an external storage drive connected to the MacBook Air. The MacBook Air only has 256 gigabytes of storage, and it's not my main editing machine. Although in a pinch, it would be able to handle 4K video edits on this trip. I just don't have any video to really go through and edit. But it just goes to show you how powerful these M2 chips really are, and even on an entry-level computer like the MacBook Air, you can still do it. Like, this is a very versatile laptop. It also goes beyond power though, because at the end of this 5-day trip, we can see the M2 MacBook Air still has 25% battery life remaining, enough to power my quick stay at the airport and the short ride home. And you can see with my week of usage, there wasn't anything crazy. These were normal everyday things, minus Final Cut Pro, right? Like, that was probably the most power intensive thing I did on this trip, but everything other than that, things like browsing the web, answering emails, video calls, listening to music, and of course watching a few YouTube videos, were things I feel like normal users do every day on their laptop. And I wasn't on my laptop all day. That wouldn't be the right thing to do on a trip outside of the country. But even on a trip like this, there's still some work that needs to be kept up on, and there's still downtime where having a lightweight laptop with a big screen was much appreciated. So this video was kind of like the opposite approach of how I usually do videos for my channel, which I feel like is usually catered more towards power users. This time I feel like this was more of a normal approach to using a laptop, and I actually think that's more helpful to more people. If you're a power using watching this, you might have thought, okay, well, it's kind of boring, but I kind of feel like for the target audience for this MacBook Air, seeing examples of how I use my laptop on this trip is probably more helpful. And as I go back home, leaving my MacBook Air in the bag until Tuesday, when I unpack it and started working on this video, it still had 9% of the battery life remaining. Just going to show you that this thing really is the ultimate travel laptop, but that has been my experience on using the 15-inch MacBook Air on my trip, no charging brick required.